little subject that's sort of interesting. It's when you have multi-line data. So multi-line in one string, which definitely can happen. And how do you deal with that? You know, we can break them up into multiple strings with the string split command. That's always a possibility. Or use paste to make them into bigger strings. But here's one way to deal with them. Let's look at this situation. We'll have some data that actually covers multiple lines. Okay, that's actually what the string looks like. Notice it has special characters. These are new lines right in a single string. So this is one string with multiple lines, which is going to cause a bit of ambiguity. By the way, if I look at what cat does, it types it up like that. You'll notice there's white space in there and other things. So how do I extract, for instance, if I want a pattern that crosses two lines, or I want to anchor things on a line versus a string, what can I do? So quickly I'm going to show some special characters that work really well in multi-line situations. And then I'm going to show a couple of modes and anchors and what they can do. Single line mode and multi-line mode. All right, so very quickly, the simplest way to work with these things is just to literally include, I mean, it's a string, this is a character, it's a Unicode. New line, we can do new lines, so we can directly put essentially the different types of returns, like new line, carriage return, and things like that. Or we could use the special PCRE commands. These are characters that are H for horizontal spacing. That's kind of a substitute for S in a way. That means horizontal white space. Capital H is not horizontal white space. V, though, that's the key one, is vertical spacing. And what that is includes any of these characters that causes you to go down a line, and then capital V is not one of those. So let's use one of those. And we're going to do a library. These libraries are worth doing. They really can't do or don't do anything that the base functions don't do, but they're kind of efficient. So in a single command like string extract, which I'm going to use, really wraps up the REGEX command along with reg matches to extract chunks of strings. So in other words, they simplify things and they assume Perl without you having to say it. So they make life a little easier. And there's about 40 of these wrappers of base things that are in Stringer. So I'm going to use string extract to give some ideas. So the simplest thing is like I can use a pattern that looks like this. So I'll start with the first line. I'll anchor at the very beginning. And who knows, you can go A, B, C. I can have arbitrary amounts of horizontal space. I can have vertical space. And then I can take just wildcard all the way to the end of the next line. That should extract two lines. Notice that? So you can do patterns. You just literally put in these special characters for vertical spacing. Or I could have done it with N itself. Look at that. I could do the new line. Same thing. Okay. But let's look at modes. So the interesting thing about nodes is what happens with these characters. So we're used to these anchors, beginning of something and end of something. But it actually depends on mode. So there's a default mode, which is just when you type normally. And in PCRE, there's two other modes. If you start your pattern with this, it's something called multiline mode. That changes the meanings of things. And then there's single line mode you can do also. Okay. And those change the meaning of caret and $sign. Instead of anchoring at the beginning and end of strings, they anchor at the beginning and end of lines. So let me try it real fast. And I should add, to reduce ambiguity, there's three special symbols in PCRE instead of these ones. In multi-line mode, you should consider A, which is kind of beginning we'll see what's the beginning of, and Z end of, and there's a small z. Those ones never change how they work no matter what mode you're in. So let's see how these work. These are beginning and end anchors. This is a beginning and end anchor. And of course there's the anchors like B, small letter b, at the beginning and end of words and things like that. But we're ignoring those for now. So let's really fast look at the first one. Let's look at $. So let's grab things at the end of a line. Let's say we're going to take 3 characters followed by arbitrary amounts of horizontal space and then $. What does this capture in the data? Now let's watch this. This should be to the end of something. You notice in the default mode it's end of string. Notice it didn't grab these ones, this one, it went all the way to only did this one right here. Okay. And this is 0 or more horizontal space, so that shouldn't really change anything if there was no spacing on it. Let's look at one of the modes. In multi-line mode, oops, I want to do a different extract. I'm going to extract all strings that match. That should be a little more interesting. Okay, when you do all strings that match, I mean, this pattern, default mode, this only anchors to the end of the string. Notice it only got the last thing in the string captured. But let's look at this one. This actually captured the meaning change. In multi-line mode, the $sign anchor anchored to the end of each line. Single line mode anchors just to the end of the string. So treats it like a single line all the way to the end of the string. So notice in the context, $sign changes its meaning. Caret's going to be the same way. Now, mind you, none of this really matters that much most of the time if you're not working with multi-line patterns. But so let's look at something at the beginning of line. Oops, I'll go with the default. We'll have caret. We'll have some couple of these, about 3 of these. I'll put horizontal space ahead too. Arbitrary amounts. And look at what we capture here. Okay, this one only captured the beginning of the string. Now let's see what happens when I do one of the modes. Multi-line mode, just like before, multi-line makes each line act like a string, and it grabbed all of the lines. So caret, and that's just like the $sign. In multi-line mode, caret and $sign captured the beginning and end of each line, not the entire string. Single line mode, it's going to treat it all like one again, just like the default. Okay. It turns out if you can't stand that ambiguity, instead of caret and $sign, you can use the symbols A and Z. A is always an anchor to the beginning of the string, and that's going to be true in all modes. So. So it's slightly less ambiguous if you're working a lot with multi-line data. Same thing is going to work for where we had the $sign before. Instead of $sign, I can do Z. That's like that. And in every one of the modes, it's also going to capture, notice, the end of the entire string. That's in multi-line mode and single line mode. So those are really handy. By the way, there's one other one, the small letter Z. I'm not going to kind of deal with it. All they do. All right. So I'm almost done here. So you can see how you can wrap patterns around, especially in multi-line mode. It happily just lets you read from one end to the other and anchor way to the end. One last symbol that changes its context, and then I'm going to shut up, is the dot. So there's something funny about this dot. I've always called that a wild card. Like that could be any character, but that's a little bit of a lie. The default behavior is not to include vertical spacing as in the wild card. So far, single line spacing hasn't done anything. Multi-line treats each line like a string. But single line hasn't changed anything from the default so far. But you'll see, single line, the one thing single line does different is it changes the meaning of the wildcard. So let's try this with a dot. Okay, here's a pattern. I'm going to anchor at the beginning. Why not? Oh wait, I'm going to be super safe. I'm going to anchor at the beginning, and then I'm going to do dot star. And I'm going to gobble stuff up. And so I'll see how far I get. This is in just no mode. I grab the entire first line because dot, the wildcard, doesn't go from line to line. It doesn't do the whole string. It stops at the new line. It matches everything else, but not line feeds and new lines and things. That's also what happens if you're in multi-line mode, because each line's considered differently. So in this case, the wildcard acts the same as his default. But single line mode, boom. Single line mode makes the wildcard match everything, including line feeds. So to reiterate, if you're working on lot of data with multiple lines and you want your patterns to wrap around from group to group or from line to line, you first of all can literally put vertical spacing or new line characters and things like that directly into your pattern, which gives you a way of wrapping around. So you can match something on one line and then match something else, or even capture something else in another line. And then we have the modes: default mode, multi-line mode, did I do? Oh yeah, there we are. Default mode, multi-line mode, and single line mode. Remembering that our favorite, which I use all the time, by the way, which are the $sign, the anchors. Beginning and end anchors, whether they're at beginning of end of line or of string, depends on the mode. And that's true for all of them. Multi-line mode treats kind of each line like a string. All the other modes treat it like there's 3 lines in a string, or one long line is a string. And that if you don't like that ambiguity when you're working with multiple lines, you can use A or Z that always anchor at the beginning of end of strings. Doesn't care where the line is. And finally, that the dot, the wildcard we're used to doing, what its meaning is, this is the one place where single line mode shines, is in single line mode. That means single line means what looks like multiple lines gets treated like one single long line or a single string. So your wildcard will grab everything over multiple lines in the entire string. Whereas most of the time, wildcards stop at the end of a line. All right, that's it. I'm done.